I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
For example, we do not consider gun ownership as part of the human rights. We consider all those deaths from the gun violence in the United States as a deprivation of the people's fundamental rights of life.
Charlie Kirk, a major voice in American conservative politics, was just assassinated, shot in the neck from a distance during a live event. And as tragic as this is, it perfectly illustrates why China's approach to gun control is designed to serve and protect the people in ways that America's gun culture simply cannot. I know what you're thinking. China, serving the people? Isn't that authoritarian? But here's the thing. When it comes to keeping people alive and safe, the data doesn't lie. Today we're going to look at how a nation of 1.4 billion people has created a society where families don't have to fear gun violence. Which system actually protects human life? Let's dive in.
When Americans are angry, they turn to guns. Every single time. We've been trying to tell you that for years, for over 20 years, because children have been unalived in their places of learning over and over and over again by hurt individuals. So it has happened to CEOs of the worst corporations in this country. It has happened to our president. Now it's happened to Charlie Kirk. Now it's happened to a political figure, which tells us something important about our culture. The internet and media have made it so the political space has expanded drastically. And in light of this, so have feelings about and surrounding politics. They've expanded, they've grown, and they've gotten serious to the point where people are so distraught and angered by their political emotions that they have resorted to pew-pewing people. And I can't act like I don't understand that. I can't act as though that feeling and that result is not expected when the talking points of these social media figures have led to a culture based around hating individuals who look like me. We are seeing a drastic resurgence of marginalization and dehumanization taking commonplace in America. In our social institutions, places that we're supposed to feel safe are now politicized in a way that hurts brown, black, and LGBTQ communities. What do you expect to happen? Charlie Kirk has been one of the biggest vessels in communicating this hatred. And now we're seeing a symptom of a deeper problem manifesting in the violence that was perpetuated against him. People are angry and afraid, and they don't like the direction that this country is going. And they don't know what to do about it. Blame the root problem. Blame the fascist culture that is taking over this country, that is making every other country look at us like we are crazy. Are you seeing it now? Are you understanding that something is wrong?
Before we talk about solutions, we need to understand the problem. The problem in America isn't just about one shooting, it's about a pattern, a culture. And I quote, "Every other country looks at us like we're crazy." That's the key phrase right there. And the numbers back this up. The US has a gun death rate of 13.6 deaths per 100,000 people, while countries like China have virtually eliminated civilian gun deaths entirely. Because while America has normalized gun violence as an inevitable part of society, the rest of the world, especially China, has made a different choice. They've chosen to serve their people by removing the tools of mass violence from the equation entirely. And this comment goes, "People want sympathy for Charlie Kirk's incident, but him and his supporters never showed sympathy for those pushing to fix gun laws after countless school and mass shootings. Now he's become another example of why gun laws are needed. And this is the brutal truth of America." Yeah, so Kirk opposed gun control after Sandy Hook and Parkland after countless mass shootings that killed children. Now he's become another statistic in America's gun violence epidemic. China doesn't have this problem because they don't debate whether children's lives matter more than gun rights. When you have 168 children killed by guns in 2024 alone, the thoughts and prayers approach has, clearly failed.
You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal.
Now, according to Charlie Kirk, some gun deaths every single year is a prudent deal. Think about that. In America, even gun rights advocates admit that their system requires human sacrifice. They're literally saying that dead children, dead workers, dead politicians are an acceptable cost for their interpretation of freedom. But what does that prudent deal actually cost? The US gun homicide rate is 26 times higher than other high-income countries. The economic burden? $557 billion annually. But the human cost? Immeasurable. Families destroyed, communities traumatized, children afraid to go to school. China looked at this equation and said, no deal. They chose to serve their people by prioritizing life over individual gun rights, and the results speak for themselves. And this comment goes, I do not like Charlie Kirk at all, but this shouldn't have happened. His statements make his death extremely ironic, but this just proves what a huge problem gun violence is in America, and his poor children witnessed this. Yeah, and the fact that his children witnessed this is kind of heartbreaking. But here's the brutal irony. Kirk spent years advocating for the very gun culture that ultimately killed him.
For example, we do not consider gun ownership as part of the human rights. We consider all those deaths from the gun violence in the United States as a deprivation of the people's fundamental rights of life, and we cannot allow private ownership of guns.
In America, even the gun debate itself reveals how normalized violence has become. Now, Victor Gao paints a very clear stance. The right to life trumps the right to own guns. Now let's check out a couple comments. Yarn in Circle says, the difference between the USA and the rest of the world is the rest of the world, including Australia, we know our children are coming home safe from school every day. Cheryl says, America has always been illogical when it comes to guns. Nothing attractive about the US or its culture anymore. Nothing. Yeah, I mean, Yarn in Circle talks about knowing their children come home safe from school, while America has had over 400 school shooting incidents just since 2020. And as the other commenter said, America's illogical when it comes to guns. And just to touch on Australia one more time, they implemented gun control after Port Arthur in 1996 and saw firearm homicides drop by 57%. I mean, the contrast is pretty stark. While American parents send their kids to school with bulletproof backpacks and active shooter drills, Australian and Chinese parents simply don't have to think about it. America has turned child mortality into a policy debate, while functional governments treat it as a problem to solve. So what does it look like when a government actually prioritizes protecting its people over protecting gun rights? Let's hear from Americans who are living in China and experiencing this firsthand.
Hey, so thanks so much for the question. And here in China, there are no guns, especially in public areas. So I'm an American living in China. My wife is Chinese. And if you wanted to have a gun in China, you'd go to a rural area and you would get a permit for hunting. So then you could own a firearm. You could use that firearm for hunting. But in terms of the city here, there's 13 million people. So it would be, I don't think they're looking to become like the United States in that way, to where it would be kind of dangerous if everyone had weapons all over downtown. So here it's very peaceful, it's very safe. You can go out, you don't have to worry about what time of day it is, if it's dark, if it's light, if there's many people around, and you can safely travel around the entire country. So China's a pretty big country, and I know that's a pretty big statement, but I encourage you guys to travel. And you can expand that even to Japan and South Korea. Those countries as well are very safe and very much infrastructure-wise built like China. So if you have no interest in China, maybe you go South Korea, maybe you go Japan, just anywhere east, right, with one of those major countries, and you'll be able to experience what the safety feels like. And it is different than being in the United States. You don't have to worry about, taking your family out at night to a park or going out to a public area where in the United States there's more nonsense going on. But anyways, guys, hopefully this was helpful and it shows you a side of China you wouldn't otherwise see or hear. Cheers.
You don't have to worry. That's what serving the people looks like. When a government removes the tools of mass violence, it gives its citizens something invaluable: peace of mind, the freedom to live without fear. This didn't happen by accident. In 1996, China enacted comprehensive gun control legislation that made private firearm ownership almost entirely illegal, with penalties including minimum 3 years in prison for illegal possession and the death penalty for gun crimes. Now let's check out a comment. USA is a very young country created by people who barged in from somewhere else and did unspeakable things to the indigenous people and to the land while convincing themselves they had the divine right to do it all. And we USers just pretend that those centuries of up close and personal violence and exploitation have had no effect on our culture and how we treat each other. You know, America's cultural relationship with violence runs deep. When you build a nation through conquest and maintain it through force, violence becomes normalized in ways that other societies simply don't experience. China, despite its own complex history, made a conscious decision in 1996 to break the cycle of civilian violence by removing guns from the equation entirely. Acknowledging that cultural patterns of violence need to be actively disrupted, not celebrated as freedom.
The most notable thing about living in China by far is the safety. So for example, right now it's about 2 a.m. I just got back from a long night hanging out with some people, and I am basically walking down a dark alley with not a single person, and I am not worried about my safety at all. So check it out. We're here just like in a dark residential alley in Shanghai, very dark, no people, and I don't care at all. This type of thing just like genuinely doesn't happen in America. You're always like looking out for yourself and making sure that there's nobody around, nobody following you. In China, or especially in Japan where I've lived before, I just never worry about it. And this is genuinely the most life-changing thing about living in either country, is that you just genuinely never really have to worry about your safety.
Life-changing. That's what real freedom looks like. The freedom to exist without fear of violence. China achieves this through their zero-tolerance approach that serves the people by prioritizing their safety above all else. While America debates how many deaths are acceptable, China simply said none are acceptable. Let's check out a comment. No daily mass shootings? People in tents all over the place? US is packed with criminals, and if you live in most cities, everyone has burglar bars on their windows, if you have a home. Fear of guns is a huge thing at home that I never experience here. Yes, American cities are so dangerous that people need burglar bars on their windows. That's not normal. China's cities of 13 plus million people don't require this level of fortification. When your society requires everyone to live like they're in a fortress, maybe it's time to question whether your freedom is actually working.
Why you guys think China is so dangerous? I couldn't agree more with this comment. So many people told me before I left for China that it was going to be so dangerous and oh my god, be careful and all these things. And I can count on one hand how many times I felt unsafe. I would be out with my friends at like 2, 3 in the morning, walking on the street, biking through Shanghai, and we were fine. If anything, I feel more on edge walking around New York or San Francisco at times. Obviously, you need to practice caution, but you should be fine going to China. And I'm gonna make a whole other video on the welcoming portion, but I couldn't agree more. Chinese people have been the most hospitable group for me.
An American feels safer in authoritarian China than in New York or San Francisco. Why? Because China's government has made a commitment to serve its people by ensuring their physical safety. They've created a society where parents don't have to worry about their children being shot at school and where workers don't have to fear workplace violence. And this comment goes, "This reminds me of the first time I went to China for study. My uncle told me to be careful when I arrived because soldiers might arrest me. But now I'm ready to return to China in August for my new life." This perfectly captures the propaganda versus reality gap. Americans are told China is dangerous, but when they actually go there, they discover it's safer than their own country. This person's uncle warned about soldiers, but the real danger was back home, where civilians have easy access to military-grade weapons. China's so-called authoritarian government actually serves its people by ensuring they don't have to fear random gun violence. The assassination of Charlie Kirk represents the complete failure of America's approach to gun policy. It's the inevitable result of a system that prioritizes abstract rights over concrete human lives. But China shows us there's another way. China's gun laws aren't about controlling people, they're about protecting people. They're about creating a society where families can walk safely in their communities at any hour, where resources can be spent on development and prosperity instead of dealing with gun violence, China's approach serves 1.4 billion people by giving them something America can't, the guarantee that they won't be shot. Thanks for watching. If this opened your eyes to a different way of thinking about gun policy, hit that like button and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, do you think Western governments should prioritize gun rights or human lives? Until next time, bye.
Think it's worth it? That is a prudent deal. It is rational.